Thank you for coming tonight. And for a number of years now, work has been proceeding in order to bring perfection to the crudely conceived idea of a transmission that would not only supply inverse reactive current for use in unilateral phase detractors, but would also be capable of automatically synchronizing cardinal grammar. Oh, I guess we're talking about the turbo encabulator tonight. Tonight's webinar is a reintroduction to the venerable Garmin GNS 430 and 530. These awesome navigation systems have been around for a long time, yet many of us are just not very familiar with the basics. So tonight, Captain Mike Jesch will reintroduce us to the GNS and set the stage for future webinars where we'll dig deeper into how to use it. Mike is a two-time master instructor with more hours than I've been alive. When he's not out flight instructing in a myriad of GA airplanes, he can be found flying around Southern California in his Cessna 182, where he's been using the Garmin 530 for, I think, over 10 years now. And as a side job, he flies the Boeing Dreamliner for a major US airline. So enough of that. Mike, let's talk GNS. I don't hear you. Uh-oh, mayday, mayday.
I hit that push to talk button twice and it's still not working.
There it is. We got you loud and clear. Welcome, Mike.
Was that going to be tonight?
I thought so. Was it turbo encabulator or was it GNS 101? I don't know.
I'm digging that turbo encabulator thing. I love it. What was that?
Yeah.
I forget. There was something you mentioned there. I want to learn how that thing works.
I need to get one.
Yeah, it'd probably make my 182 go a little faster, wouldn't it? Or at least not get lost so much.
Right, right. So I give a lot of flight reviews and I see people, pilots know how to go direct, and they go direct to the next fix and they go direct to the next. And I actually watched somebody fly direct from one fix to the next on an approach. It's probably not how it was meant to be done. Anyway.
Could they tune a frequency with it though?
Yes and no.
I've seen people use the other radio.
Right, right.
So you want to learn about GNS 430 and 530 tonight, huh?
Well, I do, and I'm going to sit back and watch once you take over, and I'm sure we'll get I'll field some of the questions, and we'll collect some to ask you in the interim and at the end.
That sounds like a great idea, Brian. Thanks, and a nice job on that intro too. That's awesome. Good work, bet. Man.
Thank
you.
So
let me say first, when Brian and I contemplated doing this a couple of weeks ago, we thought maybe on the outside we'd see maybe 1,000 people show up. I'd be really happy if 1,000 people came in. Right now we're at 2147 and counting. So that's way beyond anything that Brian or I contemplated when we hatched this plan. So thank you all so much for being here tonight. I'm really glad to have you here. And hopefully we can dispense a little knowledge here, a little information, have a little fun along the way, and learn these devices just a little bit better. But what I want to say first is this is not going to be an in-depth class tonight. The way I kind of break up these navigators is I think of it like a college class. You got a 101 level class is the basic intro stuff, kind of set the foundation stuff. Then you have 200 level stuff that's a little bit more advanced. You can get a little more utility out of the equipment. And moving on up to 300 and 400 level stuff where you're getting into the nitty-gritty ins and outs of executing, say, multiple GPS approaches or even ILS approaches with the unit as backup information. And so there's kind of a progression of knowledge and experience and background you need to have as you work these devices. So we're just going to do the 100 level stuff, and we'll see how time goes. If you're sending a lot of questions in tonight, we might go a little into some of this stuff. But we are, as Brian said, we're contemplating going into further seminars and webinars in the next year. So we're going to kind of gauge that interest level based on tonight and how we do tonight. We get a lot of good Q&A going into new stuff, and we'll be sure to touch in that in more depth in a future program. Tonight, we're mostly going to use the Garmin simulator. I sent out a link earlier, and Brian is going to post that link in the chat box here shortly. If you don't have this simulator already, I really recommend you get it. We did get a couple of early questions here. The web page now indicates that simulator is a 400 model simulator and doesn't work on Vista or Windows 7 or some of those. I don't know the ins and outs of that. The simulator that I have, I downloaded a couple of years ago. As I understand it, there's exactly one simulator from Garmin on this. So I think it's the same one. And the one that I use runs fine on my Windows 10 computer, and I simulate both the 530 and the 430 the WAS versions of both, without any problem at all. So if you download that and want to play along at home and or use this for your own practice and education training with it at home and with your instructor, then that's a great way to go. It's a wonderful tool. You're not buying 100 low lead and putting that through your engine at the same time, and you can stop it and pause it like you can't do in the airplane when air traffic control gets in your ear. It's a great way to develop your skills and then get in the airplane, and you'll be a lot more comfortable right out the chute. So if you haven't already, yeah, I see the link there in the chat box now. And if not, then just follow along with us tonight. We'll work with it a little bit. You'll see how it works. And then future ones, you can hopefully download that one. Brian, why don't you go ahead and fire off poll number 2. This is going to be a poll just to kind of gather a little demographics here. Who do we have with us tonight? This first question will be about pilot certificate levels. There you go. So click all of those. And while you're doing that, I did throw out a couple of little tip jar numbers there. I've got a Venmo account and I've got a Zelle account. If you feel like throwing a couple of bucks our way to encourage us for this and future programs, then we would be very grateful and thankful for that. And we really appreciate the support that you've shown us already. Wings credit. This credit will be, or this class will be good for a Wings Basic Knowledge 3 credit. And that will be granted automatically just by showing up here tonight. I'll have all the information I need, and sometime in the next few days, I will upload all that information and we'll be good to go. If you don't get your credit within about a week or so, holidays are coming up, let's say the end of the year, send me another email, just jog my memory, and I'll get you taken care of. For Q&As tonight, I would ask that you please go down to the bottom of your screen there and tap on the Q&A button, write your question in there. I won't be able to follow it myself while I'm doing the presentation here, but Brian will be keeping on it. And if something good comes along, we'll probably do them toward the end. He can answer the question, he will. If he can't or wants to discuss it live here, then we'll do that and during the presentation. And then I will see what's still pending. Close that one out. Let's see, how did we do? Did we get some results, Brian? Yeah, okay, so wow, a lot of private pilots, good. Almost half instrument rate, bunch of student pilots, great. Thank you for coming. I really respect that you're coming out here and getting additional training beyond that you're getting from your instructor. That's awesome. Not many ATPs. Where's all my ATP buddies? Don't they think they already know it? And GNS experience here, let's see. So most of us, so it looks like almost a little over half, call ourselves intermediate. And I didn't put any strict guidelines here about features that would trigger you to call yourself a beginner or an intermediate or an advanced. I leave that up to you. And I think I consider myself almost a master with it. There's pretty much anything I can think of to do, I know how to make the unit do. And not much, as I say, not much surprises me with this unit anymore. So that's great. Let's close out that poll. And you could throw up poll number 1 there if you would. And this is just to see what kind of GPS navigator you use. And so as you guys answer this one, I'll just say, when you get started with this thing, when you get one of these devices installed in your airplane, or you buy a new airplane that has one installed already, I really recommend that you get some training in it. Get with preferably an instructor, but even just another pilot who understands how to work this unit. That's going to be money well spent to get you on your way. I really don't recommend that you jump in the airplane and go start flying hard IFR with it down to 200.5 everywhere without any practice. You really need to have practice with these units before you move into the real world. When you do this training, and I'll touch on this again toward the end, I really recommend that you don't use a view limiting device in the airplane when you're doing this training. The lesson is not about learning how to fly or demonstrating that you can fly the airplane while not looking outside. That's beside the matter for this instruction. You need as few distractions as you can, and aircraft control is fundamental and primary. So make sure you do that first. Let's see. So what do we got? That's probably enough time here. Hopefully most of you are working with the GNS 430 and 530. Yep, looks like it. We've got, well, multiple choices here. So we add up to over 100%. A handful of 480s, that's a good thing. I'm glad there's just a couple. The 480 is a very different device. And actually it was created by another company and then Garmin bought it. I've used a CNX 80 and a 480 before. They're very different. And I don't have a whole lot of experience with them. I've used them a little and I would consider myself a beginner on those devices. GTN 650, 750, that's good. Those are coming around and you'll find if you have experience with a 430 or a 530 and you move up to a GTN 650 or 750, you'll find a lot of the experience and knowledge will transfer over. And I know the very first time I ever got in an airplane that had a GTN 750, I was doing an RNAV approach with it the first time out without any practice at all. It's much shorter transition than the first one that you learn. GTX, I had a couple email questions about the GTX. I'm not familiar with one. I have not seen one in the wild yet. My hunch is probably the same thing holds true. If you can work a 430, then your learning curve onto a GTX is going to be a lot flatter. G1000, Max Trescott wrote a couple of years ago, wrote a book on GPS and WAS, and he includes the G1000 in there. It's very similar to a 430 and 530. I do fly with a G1000. I teach in the G1000 at Oshkosh for the last few years. And I find that a lot of it translates. Again, if I can work a 430 and 530, I can jump in a G1000 and it's a whole lot easier. Avidyne and King, got a little experience on an Avidyne. I do have completed a certificate of training for an Avidyne program, but I'm not an expert with that one. I would say I'm intermediate level at best. And the King, I'm talking the KLN 89 or 90, 94. I was drooling over a KSN 770 a few years ago at Oshkosh, but that pretty much remained as vaporware and never saw the light of day. So it's a good thing that most of you are here for 430, 530, because that's what we're mostly going to talk about. And looks like that's what we're working with. So let's move on here. I'm going to open my simulator screen here. I've got the Garmin simulator downloaded, and let me go ahead and share this. So you should be seeing, yep, you can now see this is what the simulator looks like. This is the 400W/500W trainer. You can come up here with the options and you can select which unit you want to use. Notice these are all W units. So these are all the WAS units. We've got the 500 and the 400. As far as the GPS itself is concerned, all the 400 units are the same. The 500 units are the same. There's some other features. We're going to function or focus tonight on the 530W, and I'll come over maybe a couple of times and flip over to a 430. There's the biggest difference between the 430 and the 530 are the nav pages. Nav page 1 is different on the 430 than it is on the 530. On the 530, I use nav page 1 almost exclusively, and on the 430, I use nav page 2. So without any further ado, let's turn this on. And it's just like the airplane. You have to turn it on or turn on your radio master switch. It goes through a sequence of startup screens. And Brian, by the way, if you want to jump in with a live question, just do that at any time.
Okay, I'll do that. We got a lot of good questions, and I will. And while we've got that, you said somebody asked, discuss the difference between direct enter and direct enter.
I will get into that. Yes.
All right, good.
It's a source of much confusion, including to myself very early on when I was new. And I have changed the way I teach that a little bit now, at least for beginners on the unit. So yeah, it's a great question and we'll get there.
All right, great.
So, first, let's get this thing cranked up. As you see, it went through a series of screens and it lands on this page that shows you the effective dates of the database. And it's a slightly different one in the airplane. One caveat with this simulator is that this simulator, as you can see, was copyright 2007, hasn't been updated since. So it's a little bit out of date. And the later software models for the unit work a little bit different. So it's close and it's close enough, but it's not perfect. But the main thing I want you to see here is the expiration date of your nav database, this effective date and expiration date. I'll show you a little bit later a video I took in my airplane when I had an expired database installed. but it's really important, especially if you're going to fly IFR, that you check this date. If the database is current, if it's effective, you'll see this text in white. If it's expired, either you've got past the expiration date or you're before the effective date, it'll be in yellow, telling you that this is not current data. So just take a moment on this and make sure you don't have yellow text on here, that it's all white, that it's current, and it's all good to go. And you can press enter to continue. Now, this is a page, I see a lot of pilots just go right past this page and don't stop. And I think you really do, especially if you're flying IFR, it's required to stop on this page for a moment and just check things out. You see on this left side, it's telling you what the indications should be at this moment. So it's telling you the lateral CDI, the LCDI, should be indicating a half left. And you can see down here, we've got our deviation bar is showing half left. So that's indicating correctly. The lateral flag is out of view. So you don't see the red flag there that indicates you have a bad signal. We'll see that again in just a moment. So you'll see what it looks like. But for now, we can't see it. The vertical CDI should be indicating half up. That's your glide path or glide slope indicator is showing half up. And the vertical flag is out of view, and we don't see that. The to from indicator is 2. Right now on this particular indication, we don't have any indication of that. If you're looking at I think it's the GD 106 indicator, you have a to from indicator, and that will be showing 2. The annunciator is on. On this particular installation on the simulator, there isn't an annunciator. But again, if you have the 106A indicator in your airplane, and I'll show you that on my video, the GPS should be indicated on that, should be lit up. The main one of these I want to show you here is this OBS. Right now it shows 0, and the course pointer on our simulator HSI is pointing at north. If you take this simulator and move it, you see that that OBS value in the 530 moves with it. You want to make sure that that number, that OBS number, at least somewhat closely matches where the needle is pointing on the indicator. And this is part of this thing. This is one of the differences between the indicator for the 430, 530 and the box itself. They talk to each other. So this is just verifying that that communication works okay. And then for most of us, we press the enter button while it's flashing on OK. In my airplane, I've entered checklists in my 530. My before start or my before takeoff checklist is in my 530. So I just scroll up here with the big knob and go to checklists and go in that way instead. That's one of those things, I would call that a 400 level skill or technique. So we'll cover that in a future class. For the meantime, though, we'll just press enter, and this page might flip off here in just a second. So I'm going to tell you what you're going to see, and then I'll show it to you. This is going to be the satellite status page. It's going to show you the satellites that it's currently dialed into, and on the unit installed in the airplane, as it gathers, as it makes the connection with the satellite and is able to receive the data, you'll see the satellites show up in the screen here. You'll see the signal bars, signal strength bars go up and down as the satellites move. The long and the short of it is it's telling you that it's gathering the position information to figure out where it is. So if you're not doing something else in some other checklist, you might consider looking at this page, and see it flipped right through it so quickly. In the installation in the airplane, when you're on that page, it's doing this satellite data connection page basically in the background while you're looking at that other stuff. So if you spend a little bit too much time on that other stuff, you won't see the satellite page. But I'll show you in a minute how to get back to it. So it's done that. It's gotten a good position information. Once it has enough satellites that it can determine its position, then it goes on to the next thing automatically and takes you to this page. This is your nav page, and this is kind of the default. And I want to show, take a couple of minutes here and just look around. This stuff is going to seem real basic to those of you who have used this unit before or had one installed in your airplane for quite a while, but I think it's important, especially for the newbies, to review this a little bit. And we're going to start with the comm controls over here, your communication radio controls. We've got your active and your standby frequency over here. We've got a frequency swap button, and we've got a volume control. And this knob on the left is what changes these frequency values. This you probably know. The big knob changes the big numbers, and the little knob changes the little numbers, and it only changes the one that's highlighted. So you see on the nav frequency, The standby frequency is not highlighted. This one is the COM standby. So this is the one we're changing. If you turn this knob, it changes that standby value. To make that frequency the active frequency, you just push the COM swap button, moves it into the active. So this is a great feature in that you can never accidentally tune the radio the frequency that you're talking away. Some of the older radios, you could do that. One other thing I want to show you here, I'll tune another frequency in here, and we'll make this one the active frequency. This is one of the things I taught my wife, who's not a pilot, in my airplane. I said, look, if we're flying along somewhere and something happens to me and you need to get some help, how do you do that? The quickest way to teach a non-pilot, non-aviator how to get onto a frequency where they can get some help is push and hold this COM button for a couple seconds. And you'll see that it swaps the guard frequency, emergency frequency, into the active. It takes the previously active frequency and moves it to standby. So if you're not already monitoring guard, which you should be already monitoring guard, this is a quick way to get that into the active frequency. I can't do it on the simulator here, but when you push your push to talk switch to talk to air traffic control, you'll see a little TX pop up in here. That indicates that that radio is transmitting. So if you see that and you're not pushing a push to talk button, then that means you've got a stuck mic somewhere. After 30 seconds, the radio will turn off the transmitter and you'll see that little TX starting to flash. So if you see a flashing TX up here, that means you've got a hot mic. The 530, the navigator has disabled the transmitter and it's silenced it, so you're not polluting the frequency anymore.
That might have saved me from a very embarrassing moment years ago.
Have you done that too? Yeah.
Yeah. Also, we had someone asking about the blinking message light that's very distracting. Are you able to touch on that?
It's in the future. Should I do it now or should I wait till I get around there?
I'd wait till you get to it. Sorry to interrupt.
But I'll get there. So I'm glad you said that, though. It's a great question. It's very distracting to me. I don't like flashing lights. Usually a flashing light means something's not right. So
yeah, pilots don't like that.
Yeah, especially flashing red lights. I hear that's a bad thing. Now, one other thing you got here is if you push this, the COM button here where this C is, you just push that, it breaks the squelch on the radio. So you'll see an RX come up here. That means it's receiving. And what that means is you've turned off the squelch on the receiver so that you hear static. So this is a good way to check to make sure that your headphone is working. So I always do this when I'm getting ready to talk on a radio. I'll just tap that for a second, make sure I can hear a little something, and then I ensure that I'm ready to listen to whoever I'm talking to. So moving on to the nav radio here, and we got, again, our active and our standby. That works the same. The swap button's all the same. The way you move the cursor down here to the lower section, if you ever wanted to tune a VOR, and let's be honest, why would you want to tune a VOR? You're a GPS pilot now. You use that, right? So you come down here and you push the left button in, and that moves the cursor, the standby, the tuning frequency down to the lower window. So now you can tune a nav frequency. So let's tune in Los Angeles VOR here, 1360, and we'll swap this into the active. Now, as a habit, and this is one of my best practices, I guess you could consider it. This button, the active tuning, the shadow box here will stay down here, but it will automatically move back up to the top after 30 seconds. If you're like me, and I know I am, 90% of the time, when I come down here and tune a frequency, the very next thing that happens is air traffic control says, hey, contact Albuquerque Center on 12775. And I go to tune that button while that window's down here, and I'm trying to tune it on the nav frequency instead of the COM frequency. So my technique is, whenever I'm done tuning a frequency, let's dial in Seal Beach, let's say, and I make this one the active, I push it again and I put it back up here, just so that that tuner is always selected onto your COM radio and not to your nav radio. So once you do tune in the VOR and the receiver is functioning, the 430 and 530 actually have a little unit in the receiver box that listens to the identifier. And once it's heard the identifier for that station, it can decode it, and it hears that it's an SLI. It'll put that station identifier down here, and it'll put the radial and the distance on here. So without doing anything, you have listened to the identifier, you have identified the station, it's a good one, and now the GPS knows where it is and it knows where you are, so it can show you a radial and distance calculated from that VOR. This lower left box is for the GPS status. Right now it says OCN. That means we're in the oceanic navigation mode. I happen to put this one starting out somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, but I'm going to dial in another location here, and let's say, where do I want to go? Let's go to, there's a fix over by my airport. The simulator is a little bit of a pain for dialing these things in. And I just want to do that for a moment. We'll spend a little bit more time on how to enter data into the box. So now you can see we got some location out here that looks better to us. We're close to the Seal Beach VOR. It's listened to it. It's identified it. It knows we're on a 022 radial at 10.7 miles. So one minor thing here that comes into it, probably the 300 or 400 level stuff. This is not a DME distance. This is a GPS distance, which is a straight line at your altitude. It's not a slant range. So it'll tend to be a little bit shorter than a slant range DME altitude, but it's close enough for government work and for IFR navigation work. And for all intents and purposes, even if you don't have a DME in the airplane, you can use this as a substitute. So now we've gotten inside of the United States, and this box here says that we're in the en route mode of navigation. We'll talk just a little bit more on that in a moment. Oh, moving over here to the right-hand side, we've got a range buttons, and these make it so you zoom in and zoom out on your map. You're probably used to that. We've got a direct button, so if we want to go direct to somewhere else, let's pick a fix over by, this one's a little south of Long Beach, just to give it a little something to do here. This is a whole lot easier to do in the airplane with the real unit instead of on the simulator, because this pushing buttons on the screen is kind of a pain, but at least we're not burning 100 octane, right? So we want to go direct to Wilma. We set that up. We can zoom in a bit more, and if we zoom in enough, we'll start to see the line there. Now the simulator controls here. Let's chug this along. We'll give it about 50 knots, and we'll put it up at 3,000 feet. And you can see as the simulator starts to move, the autopilot is turning it. It's in the nav mode, so the autopilot now is going to track this pink line from La Habra intersection over to Wilma. So while it's doing that, let's look at a couple other things. Let it get established here. So you can see here, this is a piece of information I really like having available, XTK. This is not in the default configuration, but I have it selected in mine. In a moment, we'll talk about how to change this if we have time. But this is telling me that we're about 1/4 of a mile to the right of the course. The course is off to the left, and it says we're getting closer to it. So we can zoom in and see it even more. You can see that, yep, the line is over there on the left-hand side. As we fly toward it, this number goes down. And once we get on it, the autopilot will turn the airplane, and here we go. It says we got 18.5 miles to go. Ground speed is 46 knots. And that tracks pretty close with the speed we've got here. So let's talk about these buttons across the bottom while it's motoring around doing that. First one is the CDI button. And this tells us that on the course deviation indicator, what is the source of this navigation information displayed going to be? Right now, it's enunciated as GPS. So that what that's telling me is that the course deviation indicator on my navigator down here is talking to the GPS receiver and not the VOR receiver. If we wanted to listen to the VOR, then we make it say VLOC, and now we get our 2 indication. It's telling us where the VOR is, and it's using VOR and not GPS. So why would you ever use that? We're a GPS crowd here. We're in tune with the 90s using modern navigation. The next one is the OBS button. And let me dial this so we're moving over here. The OBS button has several different uses. For right now, what I'm going to show you, and this is touching on a 300 level skill to be able to set up a course in any direction to a waypoint you want to go to. I had one emailed question just a short little while ago. We are going direct to this waypoint, and I can take this knob, we'll put it in the OBS mode. Now you see that the magenta line has moved. So we can put that magenta line anywhere we want to go. Let's say we wanted to track the 240 or let's say 260 course into that waypoint. Here's where your 260 course is, into that waypoint. So if this is a quick way to get some navigation going like this, if you didn't want to do it on a flight plan, which is another 300 level skill. For most of the time, especially for VFR pilots, you probably don't use this. And we'll touch on this more in a future class. Now we come to our message button, and I'm right with you, whoever asked that question. I don't like flashing lights. So the light's flashing because the navigator wants to tell you something. What does it want to tell you? And we may not necessarily know. So let's see, let's ask it. We'll just push that message button and it puts up this note about do not use for navigation. Okay, well, that's good advice. We're dealing with a computer simulation here, not one that's installed in an airplane that's in the sky. So we're just going to practice with it. Once you have read the message and it's all good, you press message to continue. Now you'll notice it's not flashing anymore. So it's still telling you that it wants to give you some information, but you're ignoring it or you've acknowledged it, but it's still present. So let's go back to our direct to the waypoint here. We're navigating direct to it. Now notice I have the wrong course selected here. The desired track that we want is 229, but I've got 310 dialed into my course deviation indicator, my bearing pointer. So in a little while, as we navigate along, the GPS is going to look at that and it's going to say, hey, dummy, we want you to go this way. Why do you have that one? And in the GPS world, it's going to track anyway. You see that we are going direct to Wilma. We're not flying on this 310 heading. It's going to track this course. Let's see, we got nav. Now we're 400ths of a mile off course. And it's looking at it going, I wonder if he's figured out yet that we're going to go via a different route. And in a minute, we're going to see a flashing light here again. This is probably the most common reason that the message button starts flashing is you don't have the correct course pointer. And we're going to see in just a moment, there it goes. It's flashing. Say, hey, I got some information for you. What are you going to do with it? You push the button, you pop up the box. It says set the course to 229. Okay, good idea. So let's push the message button, make it go away. Notice the message light is still on. If we push it, both messages are still there. Clear it again. So we got to set this pointer to 229. We're going to come over here. We set it to 229. We look at the message. Now look, that message has gone away because we reset it. So don't just let a flashing message light keep going. You want to at least read the message and acknowledge it. Whether you choose to do anything about it or not, well, that's another order of business. So these next three buttons over here all kind of work together sort of in the same way, but differently than these other three. And here we're in this nav chapter here is what Max calls it in his book. And I like that terminology, so I'm going to use it here. We're in the nav chapter, and these buttons are all sort of a go and return. So we're on the nav page, we push the flight plan button, we come to the flight plan chapter, we push it again, we come back to the nav page. We push the VNAV button, we go away to the vertical navigation chapter. It says down here VNAV again, we push VNAV and we come back. We push the proc or procedure button, we come over to the procedures chapter. It says procedure down here. We push it, we come back. So they're all out and back. Now there are several other chapters available from the nav page, and the way you get to those is using this big knob on the right. If you'll notice we've got 5 little boxes down here. 4 of them are open and 1 of them is filled in. And this is an indication of how many pages you have in that chapter. So it's telling us on this installation, there are 5 pages and we're on page 2. So within this chapter, you can use the small button here to move around the pages. We click the small knob, and one click to the left, it moves over to page 1. And if you keep clicking, nothing happens. You're already on page 1. There are no pages before that. So we can push the right button. We'll go to page 2, then 3, 4, 5, and so on. Depending on your installation, in my airplane, I have a Flightstream 210 and I have a GTX 345 transponder. So I have ADS-B in. I have a couple extra buttons here that I can look at traffic and I can look at weather and some other things. So I think I have 7 pages on my nav chapter. So if you're wondering where you are, trying to get your bearings a little bit, just look down here. It tells me I'm in the nav chapter on page 2. We can change the chapter with the big knob over here. One click to the right takes us to the waypoint chapter, and then we have the aux chapter and the nearest chapter. We're going to come back to this one in a little bit. And then there's just these 4. So you've got nearest, aux, waypoint, and nav. So spend a few minutes just poking around and how do you get from one to the other? How do you find the one you want? And this is a hard thing. I can't always tell you it's going to be 2 clicks to the right and 4 to the left or whatever, because there are different installations. In particular here, let me show you the waypoint page. On this one, I happen to have my home airport is selected. I have this many pages. In my airplane, I get some extra pages. I've got a page there that I can pull up METAR information, and another one I can pull up TAF information. So the number of boxes varies based on your installation, and the 430 is slightly different, but close enough. You get the idea, and the same technique works. So if you're on one of these other chapters, you can always just take the big knob and click it to the left, just grab it and spin it. And clicking to the left will always take you to the nav chapter, and clicking to the right, this is one of my tips. I call this a 100 level tip. If you ever want to find your nearest airport, just take that big knob, grab hold of it and spin it to the right. That takes you to the nearest chapter. Take the little knob and spin it all the way to the left. No matter how many, just grab it a bunch and you get the nearest airport page, which has the nearest airport at the top of the list and then a little bit farther away, each one down the list. So here's a cool tip. One of the questions I got emailed to me in the last few days was, how do you tune a frequency automatically in here? Let me show you this one. If you're on this page and you want to automatically load that tower frequency, yeah, you could grab a hold of this knob and start spinning stuff. But this is the first little bit of data entry I'm going to show you tonight. You can push this cursor button and you're going to get a big cursor flashing on one of the boxes down here. Take your big knob down here, highlight that frequency, click enter, and watch this standby frequency here. Right now it's 121.5. You press enter and it puts that frequency in the standby. Now you press the COM and you got that tower frequency dialed in right now. So you can call the tower and say, hey, mayday, mayday, mayday. You know, I lost an engine, I'm gliding in, I'm 3.5 miles to the southwest. Remember, this is a bearing, so this is to the station, not from the station. So you would fly a 068 to get to it, and you'd be there in 4 miles. So that's the quick and simple way to get to the nearest airport page and dial in the frequency. To get rid of the cursor, push the button again, get rid of the cursor. You can big knob back over here to our nav page, and we can zoom in a little bit more here, and you can see Fullerton Airport's right here. All right, how are we doing on questions, Brian? Anything good?
Oh yeah, there's all kinds of questions. I'm trying to field as many as I can, and they're coming in faster than I can answer.
Yeah, there's a lot of information here, and I know I'm going kind of fast.
No, but you're covering some great stuff. I know there's a couple of people who have asked about entering Victor Airways into the 430, 530.
All right, well, let me just tell you, if you got a 430 and 530, you want to enter a Victor Airway, it's going to be very expensive. What you have to do is install a Flightstream and go buy an iPad and buy a subscription to Garmin Pilot or ForeFlight or one of the EFB apps and load your waypoint or load your airway into your flight plan on ForeFlight, and then you can transfer it through the Flightstream into the 530. And this is a 400 level skill that we'll cover in another class, but the 430 and 530, that's probably its biggest limitation, is that it doesn't know about airways. And remember, this thing was created about 20 years ago, and it was kind of, it was the height of technology at the time, and some things had to go in the development. I suspect there might just not be enough memory in the processor to store that.
Right. Another one asked, I'm told that Garmin is going to stop supporting the 530 and 430. Is that true or not? What do you know about that, Mike?
I don't work for Garmin. I didn't ask Garmin's permission when I decided when we got together to do this. And what I will say is all good technology has its place. And this is kind of towards the end of that. Garmin doesn't make them anymore. They do support them for the time being, but you're probably right. Eventually they won't be able to support them anymore. The components that they use to create it will just not be available anymore. And so they won't be able to support it. We have had a couple of firmware updates. I'll talk about that just a little bit more later on, probably. But I don't see that ever happening. Eventually the support will stop and we'll have a bunch of door stops and paperweights, and then we'll need to go upgrade to something new.
Right. Yeah. I also have another question here. How do you handle a database that goes out of currency on a trip? Also, is it possible for a database to go non-current while still in flight? And if so, how should this be handled?
It is possible, and this gives me a chance here for a moment. Let me stop my share here and I get the camera. A couple of the documents you need to have with you in the airplane when you fly this airplane are, you need to have the quick reference manual. This needs to be, believe it or not, in the airplane if you're using this airplane for this navigator for your primary navigation. That one has to be in the airplane. This one should be in the airplane. This is the pilot's reference guide. This comes with the unit, or it should come with the unit, and you can buy it from Garmin. But the big one that has to be in the airplane is this one. This is the flight manual supplement that is serialized to your airplane. It's got my tail number and my serial number of the airplane right here. This is a legal document. So right now, if I'm going to go fly my airplane and use my 530 for navigation, it's not legal to do because I don't have this paper in the airplane. And when you update the firmware in the navigator, you need to get a new one of these so that this document and this book match what you have installed. That's a legal requirement. And one of the reasons for that is listed in here are going to be the requirements. And there's a section in here that talks about nav database currency. And can you fly the airplane? Can you use it for navigation if the database is out of date? And so the only way really to get the answer is in here. This is the legal answer. There are other answers in the other books. You can find them online. You can find it in the AIM. But the short answer is if the database is out of date, you can use it for VFR navigation all day long. Nobody cares about that. IFR navigation, the way mine is worded, and yours may be different. Mine says I can use it for en route navigation if I verify the waypoints. I can use it. I cannot use it at all for approach navigation if the database is out of date. So the way I handle this is I carry 2 data cards. I meant to stop by the airport yesterday on my way home and get mine. I have 2 data cards. So I have one that's current, and when the new database is available, I download that onto the other card. So I can swap the card out, and you have to turn the unit off, put the new card in, and turn the unit back on again. So you get a couple of minutes of downtime while you do this. But there's another reason for doing that, and that is that a friend of mine a few years ago had the card fail on him. The card got corrupted in flight. And it turns out when your data card becomes corrupted like that, the unit is basically worthless at that point. He couldn't even use it as a radio. Lost all navigation. So he happened to be at an airport not far from another mutual friend, and he peeled off. He was at night over Virginia, and when this happened, as I recall, he called up, spent the night at his friend's house, borrowed his card, put it in there, and continued on his way. So I took that little story and I went and bought a second card. So that's another way to handle it.
That's a good idea. I'd rather have outdated information than no unit at all.
Exactly. That's my sentiment.
Yeah. How often do the updates come out? And that was another question. Is it the same as the IFR cycle?
Right. They come out every 28 days. So 4 weeks, you can expect a new one. The chart cycle is 56 days. So twice that, you get an update basically every month. Okay.
And another question real quick is, since you've done the pre-flight already, is if the plane is equipped with EFIS, will the startup page show the test parameters on the EFIS screen, similar to like with the CDI that you showed?
Yes. If flying with a G1000, let's say, yes, it does the same thing.
Okay.
Okay, so enough of me here. Let's go back to my simulator screen there, and I'm trying to go through my notes here and just make sure that I've covered everything that I like to have. So you can configure this data that's displayed here, again, I'm on nav page 2, and we have nav page 1, the same thing. We have various data that's displayed on this screen. My personal preference is I like to keep it as default as I can. I keep these to be the ones that Garmin recommends. They work for most of the cases. And I fly so many people's different airplanes with different displays. If I'm having to switch my mind and somebody wants distance over on this side and desired track over on that side, it gets confusing. I like to have all my data in the same place. Another thing to keep in mind, if you're using an iPad, let's say, as your EFB, why would you want, say, the ground speed displayed in so many different places? I've got it on page 2, I've got it on page 1, I've got it on my ForeFlight. It's redundant at that point. I know how fast I'm going across the ground. So I want to have useful information in various places. And on the iPad and ForeFlight in landscape mode, I think you can put 8 boxes down there. So just spend a little bit of time thinking about which ones you want to have. What information is important to you at that moment? And it may be different information depending on what you're doing in flight. Okay, so here's another tip I'll give you. Let me put this thing in heading mode for a little bit. What I want to demonstrate now, and this makes flying so much easier. You probably no doubt noticed that I'm using this in what's called track up mode. You have 2 choices. You can make it track up or you can make it north up. And let me show you what, no, this one only goes track up. Come over here to page 2. You can put page 2 in north up, excuse me, north up if you like. I'm going quick with this because I'm not really showing the data entry. I just want to show you this north up thing that I like it, and here's why. In north up mode, this is the way you're used to reading a map, and that works really well. But if we come off of this heading that we're on, let's say we fly over here somewhere, you're going to see our little airplane turn, and it's hard to get a sense for where you are really with respect to that course line that we're trying to navigate on. And you'll see if we come back over here to nav page 1, we're in a track up, you know that course line is laying over at an angle like that. And if you're past it, it's going to go, you're going to be continually going away from it. If it's still up in front of you, you're flying toward it. And it's kind of not very useful information. Now watch this, as we come through here, actually, let me just set it to our course heading. So we're off track a little bit. Let me see how close I can get this. You'll see this line now starts to get vertical. Let me get another couple degrees over there. When that line is vertical, you are paralleling that line and you will not go farther or closer to it. So this is a convenient way to stay on your course all the time, is just keep this pink line vertical. Oops, let me go with this one. We'll turn it over here. I'm as zoomed in as I can on this particular map. So you see over here, you don't have that little advantage, that little piece of information of how really are you flying with respect to your line. It's a little bit harder to see that you're not tracking it exactly here. So that's one of my little tricks. No matter what kind of approach I fly, I do it in this mode with track up. And if you make that pink line, if you turn your airplane such that this pink line is straight up and down in that display, you will track that line. And even if you're on an ILS approach, so you've got this selected to nav over here, let's say you've got your VOR, your needle, so your legal navigation there, you can still sneak a little glance over at this every now and again. And I know that, yes, I'm on course. Oops, put it back in GPS mode. I'm on course, but I'm not going to be for long because this line is not vertical.
Mike, is there a way to see the VOR identifier on there? I get a lot of questions about that on the 430 and or 430 and 530.
On the 430, no. That's one of the disadvantages to the 430. There's just not enough room. Actually, what happens is this upper box where you can see right now, you can see SLI, and this lower box where you see the en route mode. I believe that's configurable on the 430, and you can choose whether you display this information or that information. And to be honest, I haven't played with that a whole lot, but that's one of the major reasons why I elected to go with the 530 in my airplane instead of the 430.
Got it.
All right, so let's talk about how do we enter data. This is a problem area I see for a lot of pilots, and let me just demonstrate over here. We'll come to the aux page, the aux chapter. We're on page 1. So in this installation, we have 4 pages. In my airplane, I think I have 7 because I have all this extra gear. So we're going to come to the flight planning page, and you can see we've got fuel planning, trip planning, density, altitude. And I want to just spend a couple of moments on this page. This is something that not a lot of pilots use, I don't think, but it'll give us an opportunity to show how the data entry works. And one of the biggest problem areas that I see a lot of pilots struggling with this. So the first thing is we want to look, say, at this density altitude page. This is basically an E6B. You can use the old style metal E6B if you want, or you paid $20,000. Let's use that one. It's probably more accurate. So you push the right knob in, and that gives you that flash cursor there. Use the big knob to move the cursor to a new box of data. Little knob, if that data is changeable, and this particular data is not, that you can use the little knob, and we'll show you that in just a second. So we want to go into this menu. So we're going to press enter. And Brian's everything working okay? I just had a message pop up that my internet's unstable.
Yeah, we saw you freeze and the audio was popping off. You're back right now. I think it happens more when you turn your head, something happens to the audio.
Huh.
I think if you keep your head cocked all the way to the left, look up toward the ceiling, hold one arm up and pull one foot off the ground, then I think it's going to work perfectly.
Which arm?
Left arm for sure.
Left arm. Okay.
Yeah.
I need to...
Yeah, you're good now. Everything's working great right now. But we
just
have
hold that.
Yeah. Do you have any children gaming in the house?
I got a hunch my daughter's probably downstairs, probably on a call playing D&D with her friends or something. So
well, you're good right now.
So, all right. I might have to kick her off here if it gets too bad. Just let me know. Okay. So we're onto this page and we have some data that we can enter. So we can enter the altitude, the speed and the barometer, temperature, and the heading. This upper box is all the stuff that you can change. The lower box is stuff that the 530 is gathering from whatever sensors it has. So let's say the indicated altitude is 2,900 feet. Well, let's say we want to change that. Let's say we want to figure out what the density altitude is if we're at 5,000 feet. Turn the little knob, we'll start changing that box. Let me come back here. This box is highlighting. I can change which box is highlighted with the big knob. So the big knob tells me which data I want to change. The little knob now will change that data. So we get one click on here, starts, you notice we've gone from a big block here to one little block that's flashing on the digit that's changing right now. So if I spin this knob now, it's going to change that digit. And again, we're going to use the big knob to move the block to the next one, move that flashing cursor. So we're going to move it over to this digit. And now we're going to change this and we're going to make it say 5,000. And now we've changed the altitude to 5,000. Here's where most people get stuck. I can't tell you how many times I did this and how many times I've seen other pilots do this. When they're done entering the data, they push the cursor button again, figuring, well, I pushed the button to give me the cursor. I'll push the button to get rid of the cursor. And when you do that, the data goes back to what it was. Sort of like an escape button. And I don't know about you, but that drove me nuts until I finally established the habit pattern. So one click on the little knob starts changing the number. I come back over here. I set it to 5. I change this one. I change this to 0. To enter that data, you press the enter key. Now it's entered that data and it's moved over to the next one. So if you wanted to change this, the box says calibrated airspeed. For all intents and purposes, in your airplane, you can use indicated airspeed. What I find is typically calibrated and indicated are within a knot or two anyway. And if you're flying at a speed where the difference is greater, like close to stall speed, you shouldn't be messing with the 530 anyway. So I usually just let that one ride. If you have some other offboard equipment, it can feed airspeed data right into your 530 or 430. Otherwise, it starts with ground speed. And so you can change it to be your airspeed. Change the local altimeter setting if you want. Temperature, let's say we're at -5 degrees. Look at that. We can set it to -5. And our actual heading, it starts with the ground track that you're flying, but seldom is the ground track the same as your heading. So let's say we're actually heading 230 instead of 236. So we set 230. So now the unit has looked at all this data that we've programmed into it. It knows now knows our density altitude. It knows our true airspeed because we told it what our indicated airspeed was, what our altitude was, and what the temperature was. And it knows the course that we're flying across the ground. So it knows how to compute from your airspeed and your heading to the true airspeed and the course. And it says the wind is 230 at 258 knots. So you've got 259 knots of headwind. Of course, that's because I have the autopilot set at a speed of 0. So if I accelerate on the autopilot here and start flying, it says, oh, okay, your airspeed's still 250, but your ground speed is accelerating to 230. Now the wind's changing. So mostly what I wanted to demonstrate here was just this data entry using the enter button, the big knob, the small knob, and changing these values. Now, once you're done with that calculation, you want to get back to the nav page. Typically, I find a lot of people, especially those a little less familiar with the equipment, there's kind of a get out of jail free card that you've got that gets you back to nav page 2. And that's the clear button. You push and hold that clear button for 2 seconds. It takes you back to your default nav page. And there you are. So now you're in a known location. So that's kind of the cheater's way to do it, is the way I look at it. What I want to show you is the better way to do it. I think that shows a more complete understanding of the whole unit is we're on this page. We've got this cursor. You push that little knob to get rid of the cursor, takes you back to this page. We still have a cursor. We're going to push it again and get rid of the cursor. Now we're on our aux page 1. And we know that to move from an aux page back to the nav page, the big knob, just spin it to the left, takes you back to the nav page. So that's the better way that shows you really know your way around the unit. And the other one works though, and it's quick. It takes 2 seconds to get there, and you always know where it's going to take you. All right, what do we got? Let's talk on this page a little bit about declutter. You can see when we look at this page, there's a lot of information on it. We've got ground, we've got airspace, we've got highways, we've got intersections. If there's too much information on this page and you want to get rid of a little bit, we have a declutter feature. So you can push this clear button and you'll see it says -1. So that's taken some things off of the map. In this case, it's taken off the highways. You can push the clear button again. That takes you to a declutter value of 2. So it takes a few more things off of the map. It still shows local airports. And I don't remember what else it shows. We can declutter one more time. And now we basically lose everything that's not associated with our route. So right now our route consists of Wilma intersection. If we zoom out a whole bunch, that's it. We got a pink line that goes straight into Wilma, and that's all we see. So if you don't see something on the map that you want to see, maybe you have it decluttered a little bit too much. Once you're at declutter level 3, you can push the clear button, and that takes you back to declutter 0. Same.
And Mike, I think you might be cutting out again, but if you can hear me, I'm just wondering if there's a declutter button that you can get for your brain. I'm not sure. Hey, Mike, I'm not sure if you're seeing us frozen. We got you frozen, but it looks like you're just now coming back. How do you feel?
I'm a little woozy. Maybe I better sit down for a bit.
I think you've just been transported to another dimension or universe, and you just came back. But we lost about the last 30 seconds.
Okay.
Something about decluttering our brain by pushing on our nose?
Yes, that works. Just hold it for 2 seconds, and it'll declutter you right back to the nav page.
Okay, last thing I saw, I think that you talked about was that if it's decluttered, I'm sorry, if you don't see what you're looking for on the screen, then you've got too much decluttered and maybe
Yeah, you probably decluttered too much. So let me show you this. We're on declutter 3 now. So we don't see hardly anything. And you can get back, just push the clear button again, and it cycles through those 4 settings, and you'll see more stuff. I'm going to chase her off the network here for a few minutes. Okay, sorry about that. Hopefully she gets off, and she was on the internet on her phone, so that's probably what's doing it. She'll probably get mad when I ask her this, so hopefully not too much. Are we still sharing the screen?
Yeah, I still see your, nope, now you're not.
Okay,
just you
turned it
and
off.
me.
I wasn't seeing it on mine. Let me come back here. All right. Okay, so we're back here.
If anybody's unhappy with the technology that's going on here and our little issues, we'll refund what they paid for the webinar.
Yes, exactly. If you're not getting your money's worth, then yeah, well. Okay, so I did get a few questions about limitations over the last few days. So we already talked about the big one, is that it doesn't know about airways. And it's not just Victor Airways, it's Jet Airways and Q and T routes. It doesn't know about any of those things. So get yourself a flight stream and an iPad with ForeFlight or a tablet with something else on it, and that'll work great. Another major limitation is that you can't do holding patterns unless it's part of a procedure. So some approaches have a holding pattern or a hold in lieu of procedure turn. Those you can do, and it'll do them very nicely. But if you want to create a holding pattern at some random point in space, you can't do that. I do have a technique that I can teach, and we'll get to that in one of the later follow-on seminars. So no holds. A database must be current. We talked about that briefly. Hang on a sec. Okay. Yeah, she said sure, so I think she's getting off. I think she understands that I'm.
I think we had it freeze up a little bit, then you came back, and it looks decent now. We were able to hear you when your video went away. Maybe cycle the video off and back on again.
Okay, let me see. How can I do that? Stop video. Now, can you still see the simulator?
I can see the simulator, and you look much better right now.
Oh, do I? Okay,
yeah,
well, that's
great.
Good to know. Now I can't see it, so I have no idea where to. Oh, there's the start video button. Okay, so I'll continue like this for a little while then. And
well, I think if you turn your camera back on right now, we should be fine. I think just cycling it, we'll see what happens.
Okay.
There you go. I think we're good.
All right, on my iPad, I'm not seeing my simulators, so let's see what happens.
Let me. I see it. Yeah, just maybe stop share and reshare.
Yep, that's what I'm going to do. Make sure I can see it on my standby there.
There it is. We're good.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so the holds, you can't do a hold at an arbitrary point in space, but I do have a technique for that I'll cover in a later class. It's kind of a 300 level skill, maybe almost into a 400, depending on what you're doing. Your database must be current. We talked about that just a little bit. You can't use the unit to do IFR approaches if the database is out of date. That's one of the limitations that's in your flight manual supplement. So I don't want to see you going out there. I told you. For IFR pilots, for flight planning purposes, if you have a WAS unit, you have a 430 or a 530W on it, you can file to both the destination and to an alternate, both of them having nothing but GPS approaches. So it's kind of a nice advantage that you have if you're using a WAS GPS. If you have a non-WAS GPS, one or the other has to have some sort of a terrestrial approach, a VOR or an ILS approach available. The one caveat is, even if your alternate airport has an LPV approach available, you have to plan on a non-precision approach. So you have to have the 802. Yeah, I'm getting a bandwidth low. Yeah, I told my wife we needed to upgrade that. I think I'm going to do that. One of the big problems in this, I've gotten a lot of emails from people in the last couple of days about, especially in the training environment. If you're doing an IPC, for instance, you need to do at least 3 approaches. Most of us will do more than that in a day. And the problem with the 430 and the 530 is you can only load one at a time. So no matter if you want to do 4 or 5 approaches, that's just too bad. You have to load one approach do that approach. And then when you're done, you can load the next. There are some other navigators that you can load more of them in. And to be honest, I'm not sure if you can do that with a GTN. I know you can do it with an Avidyne IFD, but the 530 cannot do that. So it's one at a time. So that's kind of all I've got for the basics for tonight, Brian. Now, why don't you hit me with some questions? What do we have?
All right, let's see. One was, let me get here. There's only, well, 97 outstanding questions right now.
Oh, no problem. We can do that.
And most of them really are outstanding. A lot of people were asking about holds. You know, what can you put a holding pattern if it's not published? How do you do a hold? And is that, I'm answering a lot of those with maybe that's for the 102 class or the 202 class.
You know, or
is that something you want to talk about?
Exactly. That for future, the basic thing is you can use that OBS button. I talked about the OBS button. I showed you how you could turn the course pointer on your HSI or your CDI. You can go direct to the holding waypoint. You can put it in OBS mode and set the OBS to the inbound course, and then you'll get it depicted. It will not fly the turns around the holding pattern for you. You still have to manually fly that, but at least you can do a hold at a point in space, whether it's a VOR or an intersection or just a random spot. You can do a hold to that, but it's a manual
so just
process.
like using it the old way, using a VOR.
Exactly.
Yeah. And another one, a couple of people were asking about the second SD card and asking, how do you get the second database card? You're just talking about buying another card.
Yeah.
A blank card, right?
And it's a proprietary card that Garmin engineered. I don't know the specifics out of it, but I do know one of my partners in my airplane, basically, I think he went to eBay or Craigslist and bought a used one from somebody. So they're a little cheaper that way. You can buy them from Garmin. I think they're pretty proud of them. So
yeah,
be prepared to part with some cash for that.
Just be sure to format it first so you don't have any kind of extra data that might corrupt your unit. Is there a way to program the declutter button and what it clears it with each press? Or is that pre-programmed?
There is kind of here. Let me see if I can share this again. This is probably more like a 200 or 300 level. So you'll see that I'm on the nav page 2. And if we press the menu button, we get to the setup map. I think that's where we do it. Or maybe you can't do it here. There's one of these where you can set it. You know, this is it's a 300 level class. There's a thing where you can turn them on this page. Let me see, change fields, restore DC.
Yeah, that's a bit of an advanced feature, and there you can really dig in deep to a lot of these things.
Yeah, I mean, we've only got, you know, an hour and a half here, and we're already well over an hour.
Another question, and I've seen a couple of these questions about activating approach. Can you discuss what activating the approach does, or if you let it activate automatically, and what sometimes not? What's the difference?
Let me touch on that just a little bit, and we'll do that on the procedure button. Now, this is for your VFR pilots and student pilots. This doesn't apply to you, so you can go get another cup of coffee or whatever you want here. We're going to load a procedure here. Select approach. You push the procedure button, scroll down here to select approach. It assumes that I wanted one, so that's what's highlighted. It dials in your destination airport for you, so that's good. This is the approach, the airport I want to use. So I take the big knob over, or I can just press yes. I'm on this airport here. You press enter. It says, yep, that's the airport I want to use. Now it allows you to select the approach. So I get this box and I can spin down here. I want to do the RNAV 24 approach. And notice this little tiny GPS it says here on the right-hand side. That indicates that it's legal to use the GPS as your primary mode of navigation for this approach. So yes, that's the one we want. And now it asks about the transition. Do we want to do vectors to final, or do we want to do the full approach from Pomona as the initial approach fix? Here's a big caution. I'm going to get into this more in probably a 300 level class on approaches. I would caution away from ever using vectors to final. There's almost no reason ever to do it. There's a few very limited cases where I think it's okay, but you can really get yourself into a little bit of trouble with it. So I prefer always loading the approach from the full transition, whichever transition makes the most sense for where you're coming from. So I'm going to load that. And now it asks, do I want to load it or do I want to activate it? And here's the crucial difference. If you activate this approach right now, the navigator will throw away everything that's in your flight plan. So you're tracking a course from point C to point D, and you're going to go to point E and F later on. You just want to load the approach. If you hit activate right now, and this is in all cases, anytime you activate an approach, it will take you from where you are direct to the initial approach fix and then do the approach right now. So remember where we were down off the coast here somewhere. Let's do this. I'll activate this approach. And when you activate it or when you load it, either way, it takes you over to the flight plan. It says, okay, here's what I'm going to do. We're going to go direct to Pomona. This little symbol over here means direct to Pomona as the initial approach fix. We're going to fly a 039 course for 29.6 miles down to Lamy, and so on down to Havre to Actac, which is the final approach fix, and then to the runway, which is our missed approach point. So that's what we're doing. So now remember, we're on the flight plan page. To get from the flight plan page back to the nav page, just press the flight plan button. We're on the nav page. So now we're going from our present position direct to Pomona here. I'll put a little bit of speed on this. Actually, let me get turned over the right direction first. In heading, and I'll go slow until we get the airplane headed in the right direction. So by activating the approach, you go direct from wherever you are to that initial approach fix that you selected and throw away everything else. And one of the dangerous things, one of the reasons I don't like selecting vectors to final, if you pick that, it's just going to pick some random intercept course to that final approach course from wherever you are. Well, are you going to be able to dodge the mountains and trees with that? How do you know? You're basically on a random route to nowhere. Okay, so let's pick up.
We got another question on or were you done with this?
For now, we navigate a little bit.
Okay. Someone was asking about the direct enter versus direct enter.
Okay. I'll show you that here in just a second. When we get up a little closer to here, I'll show you what happens. Now, we are, let me go to page 2. I have or page 1 rather, we have the time. We're 6 minutes to that fix. So we got a couple of minutes and we're speeding up. So we're going to chop that down to 2 or 3 and I can talk about this other stuff. So the difference now is if we had picked instead, select approach, this approach, this airport, this approach, this transition, and we select, normally we'd have a load here. In this case, we have only the approach is the only thing in our flight plan. So if you select load instead, which is what I usually do as I'm progressing toward my destination, I'll select load, and that will load this approach after the flight plan that I have loaded. So I'm going to continue navigating along the flight plan I've got loaded, and after that is going to be the approach. So that's probably more like what I want to do. The dangerous thing is, another dangerous thing is, if let's say you've already flown past Pomona, you're getting vectors down here somewhere. Let's say air traffic control is vectoring you to final, and you want to do this. And I've seen a lot of people who think I have to activate that approach. It's not going to navigate the approach unless I activate it. Well, the reality is that the unit does. It will activate automatically when the certain conditions are met. I've seen people down at this part of the approach and they activate it. And remember what happens when you activate it? It navigates you from present position direct to the final approach fix. So now you're going direct to the station there. That might not be what you want to do. So let me come back to the nav here and see how we're doing. I'll go redirect a waypoint here. Okay, we're almost to the point now where I can start to demonstrate this. We're only a minute out. I still have a few more seconds to go on what we're doing. And it's flashing, probably wants a new course. Steep turn ahead, yeah, we know that. So generally speaking, I just load the approach. even if I'm on vectors to final, and I will load a transition almost always. And let me start slowing down here, down to a more, take it out a ludicrous speed. We'll go back down to normal speed, about 90 knots. So you can see this little dashed line here. It's doing turn anticipation. It's planning on turning early so that it rolls out of that turn exactly on course. So what I want to show you here is, let's say we want to get on this, we want to fly directly to Lamy intersection. So we push the flight plan button, we come over to the flight plan, we push the cursor button, we get a cursor, we take the big knob down here to Lamy, and you press.
Excuse me, did you say Lamy intersection?
I did.
I think that's in Hawaii.
There was much hilarity the first time I went to that approach on approach frequency. That's a story for another day. So I want to go directly to Lamy. So I just push direct. I press enter.
I am still laughing, just so you know, but I'm muting my microphone.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Remind me, I'll tell you the story offline. So direct, enter, enter. Now we're navigating direct to Lamy. So that's a direct enter, enter. Now let me see, can I pull this up here? And let me just reset this. I'm going to do a fancy here. Let me put it in heading mode here again while I set this up. If I wanted instead, I want to go back. I don't want to go direct to Lamy anymore. I want to fly that course that is on the approach from Pomona to Lamy. So I want to fly that pre-programmed course. Now I come down here in the flight plan, and there's two ways to do this. And here's the distinction. The other one to go direct to it, remember, was direct, direct enter. If you want to activate a leg, that's direct, direct enter. So direct enter, enter versus direct, direct enter. So we highlight the fix, we press direct. It says, yeah, we want to use that intersection. Press direct this time. And it says, oh, do you want to activate the leg from Pomona to Lamy? And enter. We'll activate now that leg. So that's what we're doing. So that's the distinction between direct enter, enter, goes direct to waypoint. Direct, direct enter activates the leg.
Well, that's awesome. I just learned something there. That's great.
That's the way I used to teach it. And it's the way I started out teaching it when I first started teaching the 430 and 530. And I found it so confusing. It was really hard to keep them straight. And which one do I need at this moment? It got to be too much. There's an easier way. And this is what I teach now, especially for a more advanced user, a little bit more familiar with the equipment. It starts out the same though. We come here, push the flight plan. I want to activate that leg down there to Lamy. So I give myself a cursor onto the waypoint that I want to use to anchor the leg I want to fly. And instead of pressing direct, I press menu. You press menu, look at that. It pops up a context sensitive menu. And in this case, it's the first item in the activate leg. So yeah, that's what I want to do is activate that leg from Pomona to Lamy. Boom, it does that. I found that to be a lot more clear. So especially when you're new and you're kind of trying to learn your way around, that might be an easier way to keep it clear in your own mind. Once you've worked with it some more and you're quicker with it, you can use the direct, direct enter. So let me, I'll pick this pace back up a little bit. The question then comes up, I'll go kind of quick on this because we want to get around here. I'm in heading mode and I'm flying this heading that's going to intercept this, this course. My desired track is 165. So I want to set my course pointer on that 165, or I'm going to get the message from it. So I set that course pointer on 165. So this is indicating that the course is over there to my left, and you can see it here. This is the north up mode. It's a little bit less clear to see exactly what's going on and how much do you need to turn. Is it a left turn? Is it a right turn? I find it easier to use a track up mode, and here it's a lot more clear and easily understood.
And real quick, Mike, how are you toggling between track up and north up? Are you just changing the pages in the nav?
Yes.
Okay.
I have this configured so my nav page 1 is track up, and my nav page 2 is north up.
That's a really cool technique. Thanks.
So that's yeah, that and $2 gets you a cup of coffee with your employee discount. Okay, you'll also notice we have a course deviation indicator here. Again, this is the 530 on nav page 1. We have our CDI, Here's our cross-track error right here. It says the course is over there 1.5 miles to the left. And notice, as another aside here, by the way, our navigation mode is terminal. Earlier we saw oceanic when we were in the middle of the ocean. We see en route when you're in the en route phase of your flight. When you get within about 30 miles of your destination, you see terminal mode. And that means that this course deviation indicator is 1 mile from the edge of the cage to the middle. So we got less than a mile, and now the needle starts coming in. We can switch back to nav mode, and the autopilot will track to intercept that.
And can we declutter by one step to see it better?
And you have to declutter to 2. And
okay.
Honestly, for myself, I don't like the declutter modes in this. There's some other things I wish it would declutter more.
Yeah, lower levels. The same way.
So you can do much better with this on the GTN series. You can program at which scales certain things appear and disappear. So let me ask you this now, Brian. Got a question for you. We're at this point in the approach. The initial approach fix is behind us. We're going up to the one of the intermediate fixes here. Do I need to activate this approach?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. I can't hear you.
Put you on the spot there, didn't I?
No, I believe you don't.
Right. So we come here to not the menu button, the procedure button. It says we want to activate the approach. And this is a common misconception. I see a lot of IFR pilots doing this. Well, I need to activate the approach. What happens when I activate this approach?
Yeah, doesn't it take you directly to the final approach fix?
Takes you direct present position. So you want to discontinue the current approach and go to the initial approach fix. Yep. It's going to do a turn right back behind us again, back to the IAF.
Yeah, that's a big party foul right there.
It's a big, it might even get you a phone call and a letter of investigation. So I'm going to activate this leg again, back onto the approach. And, let's say air traffic control does say, okay, fly heading 190, intercept the final. So I set 190 down there. I put it in heading mode. Might actually take more like a 180.
And I think that might be important enough to cut. First of all, never activate the approach if you're flying segments like this. But second of all, I think your recovery from that, if you do that accidentally, you just recovered from it right there and whizzed by it pretty quickly. And I would like to see that again if you have a chance. So
the first thing is, if the airplane's not doing what you want it to do, make it do what you want it to do. You are the pilot in command. You have the final authority. You're driving this bus here. So let's make the bus do what you want it to do. So maybe that's put it in heading mode and set the heading on whatever makes sense. Maybe that's turn the autopilot off and hand fly the airplane, put it back where you wanted, get it squared away, and then go back and get the box put together. But don't just let it keep turning and going somewhere that you don't want to be. So, and I'll have another chance here to recover from something in a moment.
Okay, so, cool. And I believe at our work, they taught us to take it down one level of automation when the automation isn't doing what you want.
At least one level, yes.
Right.
Take the appropriate level of automation for your current situation, for what's going on. And not just your current situation, but maybe more importantly, your understanding of the current situation. So you might not even know what the current situation is yet. So you need to get back into the game as quickly as you can. So let's say they said fly heading 180, intercept the final, cleared for the approach. So we're on this 180 heading. How do we activate the leg in the approach? We open the flight plan again. Here's our flight plan. We give ourselves a cursor and we scroll down to the fix that we wanted to do, which was hover. We got lay me here and then we got hover. So we're going to come to the flight plan, give ourselves a cursor. We're going to come down here. We're going to highlight hover. We're going to press menu. We're going to activate leg, fly that leg. Yep. Now we got our pink line where we want it to be. And this is a 243 inbound. You can see it's starting to make sense. And that's how you do that. Now let me just pause here for a moment. This is a perfect illustration of why I don't like to use vector to final. And again, for those of you who've used this navigator and used vectors to final, I'm into the 300 level stuff here again, and we'll go into this more deeply in a future one. But when you activate vectors to final, you're not going to see hover anymore. So are you outside of hover? or are you inside of hover? You don't know because you don't know where hover is. And the problem is there's this altitude step down that happens right here. So is your minimum altitude 2,700 feet or is your minimum altitude 2,000 feet? You don't know. So this is why I don't like to use vectors to final, and more on that later. So let's come back up here. We'll start flying. I'll put it in nav mode. We're going to track this. And again, what happens if you activate vectors to final? You can just push, not the menu button, push the procedure button. If I activate approach right now, what's it going to do? You're still with me, right?
Oh yeah, I'm still here. I'm sorry. Activate approach, we go direct to the final fix.
To the initial fix.
Oh, the initial fix. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, so you remember we're on the approach. We're less than half a mile from Haber. ACTAC is the final approach fix, and I'll go ahead and get past here, and let's wrap it up after this one right now, and we'll go to our closing stuff because we're at an hour and a half already. So as we pass Haber, ACTAC, the final approach fix, becomes the active waypoint. Look at this. Our navigation mode changed from terminal to LNAV plus V. This is our approach mode. So this is how we know that the navigator is in the approach mode and you've got legal navigation to continue the approach. This is key. And this is what you want to see hopefully before you get to the final approach fix, is this reverse video, black letters in a green box that enunciates your approach mode. And we'll talk about the approach modes later in another segment. That's too deep to get into tonight. But as you go by the final approach fix, especially if you're doing an RNAV approach, you have to see some sort of approach navigation here, or you don't have the accuracy that you need to continue the approach. So now back to the question here. We go back to the procedure. Let's say we activate approach from right here. And once again, repeat after me. What happens when you activate the approach? You go direct, you would discontinue the approach you're on. You go direct to the IAF that you selected. And look at that, we're going right back to Pomona. So it might not be what you wanted to do. So with that, we'll wrap up what I've got here and get to some closing comments. And let me just stop the share now. And my video's on. You can feel free to turn yours on if you want. So what I want to talk about again is some general guidelines, best practices for your training. When you get one of these devices, whether you buy a new one and put it in your old airplane or buy a new airplane that has one, get with an instructor who knows how to use it, and spend some time on the ground, even with an external power provided to the aircraft so you don't kill your battery. But practice some of this stuff. Get familiar with how the menus work, get in and out of them. How do you enter data? How do you select an approach? There are excellent simulators. This one is available only for computers, not for tablet devices. If you have a GTN, there's an excellent simulator on the GTN. Perhaps I'll do a future webinar on that. There's an excellent simulator for the Avidyne IFD, again, on the iPad. Maybe we'll consider doing a future class on that too. But spend some time with these things before you're going to do battle with the GPS in the real world. You'll be glad you did. One student I had brought a docking station with him. This is a device you can plug into the wall. You take your 530 out of the airplane and put it in this docking station, and you can use the actual equipment. It won't get your position, so you can't look at a lot of particular in-flight stuff, but it was a great opportunity. And we spent an hour and a half just going through menus and showing them how that whole structure thing worked. And he found it very valuable. Draw yourself a diagram of how it's all connected, especially if you have an Autopilot or a GPSS or an Aspen or something, so you understand how these nav track modes, heading modes, GPSS mode, how all this stuff works together. If you draw a picture where and how these connections work, you'll understand it a lot better, I think. There are a lot of good videos and tutorials online on the manufacturer website, on other websites that you can go to for great information on how to use this stuff. And again, the more practice you get with it before you get in the airplane, the more valuable it's going to be to you. Don't use a hood or foggles or whatever. If you're doing a lesson that's primarily on this device, throw that stuff away, leave the windows open. You don't need that distraction. You need eyeballs outside. You're going to get a good enough distraction going on anyway. Why add that distraction too? I would urge you to raise your personal minimums for approaches for a time until you get familiar with this. I wouldn't recommend going into 200.5 weather and doing the lowest LPV you can find right away your first time out. So, you know, whether you double them or triple them, call your ceiling 500 feet or something, leave yourself some leeway until you're comfortable with it. And I think you'll find, as I did, that performing an LPV approach is easier than an ILS. It's a lot smoother. It's just new. So take care of that. When I first put the 530 in my airplane, I didn't file slant Golf equipment suffix for a while. I waited until I was familiar with it. I started filing as a slant alpha that I had DME and used that for a little while.
I've filed the same way many times, only to find out later that ATC thinks everybody has GPS now and they clear me direct to intersections, even though I've filed slant alpha. So you got to watch out for that.
That's absolutely true. And I was flying with a client in a non-GPS airplane. Now he's got a GNS 750 in there, and they cleared his section. Sorry, we can't do that. We don't have that capability. So yeah, just tell them. And yeah, I already answered that question. Can't do holds. Resources. I mentioned Max Trescott's book. It's an excellent book. He's also got a training program available on his website for practicing and studying all there is to know about RNAV approaches. That's great. Pilotsafety.org has some great videos and stuff on there. And use the simulator. Use these tools that are available. So I'll consider probably doing a future course, especially on approaches. I mean, we spent 30 minutes or so on IFR approaches, and we barely scratched the surface. So there's a whole lot more detail we can go into there.
And I think on that note, we're getting so many great questions. There's no way to address them all, but if you're feeling shorted because we didn't get to your question, don't feel like you put it in there in vain, because we're going to go through all the questions and we'll develop future classes from those questions and be sure to address them, because there's so many good things we couldn't possibly answer tonight, but a lot of them are going to give us some great ideas. We'll get to it, and some of them we'll even answer by email afterwards. And a lot of people are asking if this is available in the follow-up email. You will get a link to watch this online later.
Yes, very true. And my email address is in there. I know many of you have been sending me emails already this last week, so thanks very much for that. I wrote them all down, at least except for the 150 I think I got that are we going to have a recording? I didn't bother writing all of those ones down. So, but a lot of this stuff about approaches, that is advanced stuff. I knew we weren't going to be able to cover everything here, but you give us good fodder for future courses.
Absolutely. A lot of people asking when the next one's going to be. We're going to have to put that out there, and where they'll find out about it. They're asking that too. I see a lot of those questions. Again, they'll be through the FAA SPANS thing, but also through, for starters, we'll put it on my website, which is captainschiff.com/seminars. And there'll be a link to all that kind of stuff in the follow-up email as well. But we haven't set a date yet, but we're looking for that. We'll coordinate it, we'll do it. And there's a lot of great information in the questions we're getting.
I thought we had it down for next Tuesday.
Oh, sure we did, and I'll see you there.
Yeah. I'll probably be on my way to Korea again. So yes, so that is about all I had for now. Let's see, I see you wanted to answer one live here. I can do real quick, and I'm actually in a very good spot to answer this one.
Okay.
How do you delete an active flight plan? That's a nice, simple one. So we're flying on, we got flight plan, you press the flight plan button.
Can you share it?
Menu. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, let me reset this back to normal, and I'll share this. And So back to the simulator here for a moment. We're flying along. We got our flight plan. It's about ready to turn something. How to delete that? You push the flight plan button. You press menu, and you'll see down here a couple clicks is delete flight plan. So enter, delete all waypoints in the flight plan. You really want to do that? Yeah, sure. Now look at that. We got nothing.
Do you really want to do that? I found that when I ask myself, how do I do this? I go to the menu page on whatever go to the right page and then hit menu. And I find a lot of
That's
options
true.
there.
The menu, it's context sensitive. I press it now and it gives me something different.
Right.
And say, come back over here to nav page 2 and press menu, I get a different menu. So depending on where you are or what you're doing, you get a different menu.
Yeah, play with the menu button on different pages. I encourage that.
Yep. Great. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm blasted now after that. Coming back from Honolulu on the red eye yesterday. I'm glad we didn't do it last night. And
yeah, you've been busy. You've been flying a lot. I smell pizza in the other room, so I'm motivated. I think maybe we should call it a night.
I'll do that too. And I recommend all of you tonight. Again, thanks so much for coming tonight. I'm really happy to see the level of enthusiasm and interest in this. And I strongly suspect that we will be out there with another one very soon. So
I'm sure
thanks
we
for
will.
tuning in tonight, and have happy holidays, and we'll see you next year.
Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you very much.